Yes, sir, said the head whackers, and on those who mind their own business I will have mercy, but all the rest I will punish. Yes, sir, answered the head whackers. And since you have been unable to live by your own will and have yourselves wished to be in bondage, henceforth you will be called not head whackers, but fool's folk. Yes, sir, answered the head whackers. Then the prince ordered the ambassadors to be served vodka and each to be given a pie and a crimson neckerchief. And having imposed many tributes on them, he dismissed them with honor. On the way home, the head whackers sighed. They sighed unceasingly. They wept hard, witnesses the chronicler. That's princely right and wrong for you, they said. They also said, we yesed and yesed and yesed ourselves away. One of them, taking up the harp, sang, rustle not, dear mother green grove. Do not keep me, fine fellow, from thinking my thoughts. For tomorrow I, fine fellow, will go to be questioned before the terrible judge, the Tsar himself. As the song went on, the head whackers hung their heads more and more. There were among them, says the chronicler, gray-haired old men who wept bitterly, having forfeited their sweet freedom. There were also young ones who had barely had a taste of that freedom, but they too wept. Only now did they understand how beautiful freedom was. And when the concluding words of the song rang out, and for that, fine lad, I will grant to you a lofty mansion in the wide field, 2 posts, and a crossbar, they all fell on their faces and sobbed. But the drama had been accomplished irreversibly. On reaching home, the head whackers immediately chose a swampy place and found on it a town called Foolsburg, themselves thereby becoming Foolsburgers. Thus did this ancient stock blossom forth, adds the chronicler. But this submissiveness did not please the stealer-dealer. He was in need of rebellions, for by suppressing them he hoped to find favor with the prince and also to extort bribes from the rebels. He began to pester the Foolsburgers with all sorts of injustice, and indeed before long he stirred up rebellions. The first to rebel were the corner snoopers, then the haggis eaters. The stealer-dealer went against them with a cannon, fired nonstop, and having destroyed them all, concluded a peace. That is, went to the corner snoopers and ate halibut, then went to the haggis eaters and ate haggis. For this the prince praised him greatly. However, he stole so much that the rumor of his unquenchable stealing even reached the prince. The prince was greatly inflamed and sent the unfaithful servant a noose. But the dealer, being a veritable stealer, wheedled his way out of it. Without waiting for the noose, he forestalled the punishment by doing himself in with a cucumber. After the stealer-dealer, a man from Odoevo came, quote, instead of the prince, end of quote, the one who, quote, bought a pennyworth of Lenten eggs, end of quote. But he, too, figured that he would not survive without rebellions, and also took to pestering them. The skew-bellies, the fancy-breaders, the porringers all rose up, defending the old times and their rights. The man from Odoevo went against the rebels and also fired at them relentlessly, but it was all in vain. Because not only did the rebels not submit, but they drew in the sooty huts and the loose lips. The prince heard the mindless shooting of the mindless fellow and suffered it for a long time. but in the end could not stand it, went personally against the rebels, and, having destroyed them all to a man, went back to his place. I sent a real stealer, and he stole, the prince lamented. I sent another nicknamed Sell a Pennyworth of Lenten Eggs, and he too stole. Who shall I send now? He spent a long time deciding which candidate to prefer, a man from Orel, on the basis of the saying, quote, Orel and Cromy are the foremost thieves, end of quote, or the Shoy man, who, quote, went to Petersburg, slept on the floor, and didn't fall down, end of quote. But he finally gave preference to the Orel man because he belonged to the ancient family of the, quote, cracked heads, end of quote. But as soon as the Orel man arrived, the Staritsa people rebelled, and to mock their chief, greeted a rooster with bread and salt. The Orel man went to them, hoping to be regaled on sturgeon, but all he found there was, quote, a whole lot of mud, end of quote. Then he burned down Staritsa and gave the Staritsa women and maidens over to himself to be violated, quote. On hearing about it, the prince cut out his tongue, end of quote. Then the prince attempted once again to send, quote, a thief of a simpler sort, end of quote, and with that in mind, selected a Kalyazin man who, quote, bought a pig instead of a beaver, end of quote. But he turned out to be a still greater thief than the stealer-dealer and the man from Orel. Having driven everyone to rebellion, he, quote, killed and burned them, end of quote. The prince rolled his eyes and exclaimed, no foolishness is more grievous than foolishness. And coming to Foolsburg in person, he shouted, flog 'em all! With these words, historical time began. The register of mayors appointed to the town of Foolsburg by the higher authorities at various times, 1731 to 1826. Number 1, Clementi Amadei Manuelovich, brought from Italy by Byron, the Duke of Courland, for his skill in cooking macaroni. Being suddenly promoted to an appropriate rank, he was made mayor. On arriving in Foolsburg, he not only did not abandon cooking macaroni, but even strove to force many to do the same, which was his claim to glory. Beaten with a knout for treason in 1734, he had his nostrils torn out and was exiled to Berezov. Number 2, Ferapontov, Foti Petrovich, brigadier. Former barber for the same Duke of Courland, conducted multiple campaigns against the tax defaulters, and was such a lover of spectacles that he did not allow any floggings unless he himself was present. In 1738, torn to pieces by dogs in the forest. 3, Gigantov, Ivan Matveyevich, taxed townsfolk 3 kopecks per head in his own account, preliminarily drowning the director of economic affairs in the river, gave bloody beatings to many police officers. In 1740, during the reign of the meek Elizabeth, was caught having a love affair with Avdotia Lopukina, beaten with a knout, and after having his tongue cut out, exiled and imprisoned in Cherden. Number 4, Urus Kugush Kildabayev, Manil Samlovich, lieutenant captain from the Lieb Company, distinguished himself by mad courage and once even took the town of Foolsburg by storm. When this became known, he was not praised, and in 1745 was dismissed with public disclosure. Number 5, Lamvrokakis, a runaway Greek with no name or patronymic, and even without rank, caught by Count Kirill Razumovsky at the market in Nezhin. He traded in Greek soap, sponges, and walnuts. Besides that, was a proponent of classical education. In 1756, he was found in his bed, bitten to death by bed bugs. Number 6, Blakherov, Ivan Matveyevich, brigadier, was 7 feet tall and prided himself on being a direct descendant of Ivan the Great, a famous bell tower in Moscow, broken in half during a storm that raged in 1761. 7, Pfeiffer, Bogdan Bogdanovich, sergeant of the guards, a native of Holstein, having accomplished nothing, replaced in 1762 for ignorance. Number 8, Shagmug, Dementi Varlamovich, was appointed hastily and had in his head a special device for which he was called Music Box. This, however, did not prevent him from putting in order the arrears neglected by his predecessor. During his administration, disastrous anarchy took place, lasting for 7 days, which will be recounted further on. Number 9, Epikurov, Semyon Konstantinovich, state councilor and chevalier. Paved Grand and Gentry Street, started beer and mead brewing, introduced the use of mustard and bay leaf, collected arrears, was a patron of learning, and solicited for setting up an academy in Foolsburg. Authored the work Lives of Remarkable Apes. Being of sturdy build, he had 8 consecutive mistresses. His wife, Lucaria Terentieva, was also very indulgent, thereby contributing greatly to the splendor of her husband's rule. He died a natural death in 1770. 10. Marquis de Sanglat, Anton Potasievich, of French origin and a friend of Diderot, was distinguished by his frivolity and liked to sing bawdy songs. Flew in the air in the town garden and almost flew away, except that he caught the skirts of his frock coat on the spire, and it took some effort to take him down. This caused his dismissal in 1772, but he did not lose heart, and the very next year performed in Eiler's garden at the Mineral Waters. This is certainly a mistake, publisher. 11. Ferdishchenko, Peter Petrovich, brigadier, former orderly of Prince Potemkin, was none too bright and also tongue-tied, neglected tax collecting, liked to eat baked ham and goose with cabbage. During his mayorship, the town suffered from hunger and fire. Died in 1779 of overeating. 12. Wartbearden, Basilisk Semyonovich. His term of rule was the longest and the most brilliant. He led a military campaign against the defaulters of tax payments and burned 33 villages. By this means, he collected 2 rubles 50 kopecks of arrears, introduced the card game La Mouche and olive oil, paved the marketplace and planted birch trees along the street leading to the public offices, resumed petitioning to create an academy in Foolsburg, but his petition denied, built a jailhouse instead. Died in 1798, supervising a flogging and with a police captain by his side. 13. Blagardov, Onufry Ivanovich, former stoker in the Kachina Palace, unpaved the streets paved by his predecessors and built monuments out of the obtained stone. Replaced in 1802 for disagreements with Novosiltsev, Sartaryevsky, and Stroganov, a famous triumvirate at the time, on the subject of a constitution, in which controversy he was later proved correct. 14. Mikhailadze, Prince Xavery Georgievich, a Circassian, descendant of the sensuous Princess Tamara. Possessed of seductive appearance, he was so fond of the female sex that he increased the Foolsburg population twice. Left a useful handbook on the subject. Died in 1814 from exhaustion. "15. Benevolenski, Feofilat Irinakovich." You say that name again. Number 15. Benevolensky, Feofilat Irinakovich, state counselor, a friend of Speransky at the seminary, was wise and had a penchant for lawmaking, predicted open courts in the Zemstvo. Predicted open courts in the Zemstvo. Was in amorous relations with Raspopova, a merchant's widow, who fed him savory pies on Saturdays. In leisure time, he wrote sermons for the town priests and translated the writings of Thomas A. Kempis from the Latin. Reintroduced mustard, bay leaf, and olive oil for reason of being good for people's health. Was the first to impose a levy on tax farmers and profited 3,000 rubles a year from that. In 1811 was called to account for condoning Bonaparte and sent to prison. 16. Pustule, Ivan Pantaleich, major. Turned out to have a meat-stuffed head for which he was exposed by the local marshal of nobility. 17. Ivanov, Nikodim Osipovich, state councilor. Was so small that he was unable to contain the extensive laws. Died in 1819 from strain, trying to comprehend a certain Senate decree. 18. Ducheriot, Viscount Angel Dorofeevich, of French origin, liked to dress in woman's clothes and feast on frogs. On closer inspection, turned out to be a girl, exiled abroad in 1821. "19. Melancholy, Arist Andreevich, state councilor, Karamzin's friend. Was distinguished by tenderness of heart and sensitivity, liked to drink tea in the town park, and was unable to see the Heathcock mating dance without tears. Left several treatises of idyllic content and died of melancholy in 1825. Raised the levy on tax farming to 5,000 rubles a year. Number 20. Sullen Grumble, scoundrel. Former army latrine cleaner, also responsible for floggings, a downright stinker. Destroyed the old town and built a new one in another place. Number 21. Hijack swashbuckling, Archistrateg Stradalatovich, Major. We'll pass over this one in silence. He rode into Foolsburg on a white steed, burned down the school, and abolished learning.